Good morning and welcome. It was suggested to me that maybe before I speak, it might be a good idea for us all to introduce ourselves so that we start on a footnote where we know who is here and where they've come from. So let me start. I'm Professor Kofi Nti, President of the Ghana Academy.
Yeah.
We are hosting this function. Do you have a microphone?
Hello, good morning. I'm Professor Rose Emma Mama Ntuamensa, Fellow of the Academy.
Good morning. I'm Emerita Professor Isabella Kwachi. I'm the Vice President of the Sciences Section of the Academy. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Abba Bentlandam. I'm a past president of the Academy.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Salamatu Jebuni Doche, representing Bank of Ghana. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Eric Defo, representing the Association of Ghana Industries.
Good morning. My name is Mohammed Hadi Shaibu, Director of Finance, UDS, Tamale.
Hello, good morning. My name is Lisbeth Obese, Director of Finance, University of Cape Coast. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I'm Senyo Akoli, Finance Officer, University of Education, Widiba.
Good morning. My name is Felix Edufu, Director of Finance, University of Health and Allied Sciences. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Shadrach Kweku, representing the Ghana National Union of Technical Students. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm James Hawkins Ephraim, a Fellow of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences.
Good morning. My name is Justice Ayam, and I'm the consultant who will be presenting the paper on behalf of the Academy.
Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Techua Menu, and I am the Chair of the Management Committee of the Higher Education Project.
I am Peter Notu Kotwe, MP for Akachi North, Ranking Member on Education.
Good morning to you all. I'm Emerita Professor Elizabeth Adefio Shandov, former Vice President of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences.
I am Clifford Tego, Chairman, not chair, I'm not a chair, I'm a chairman, Project Steering Committee. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Kwame Nakwansa Edu, Vice Chancellor, University of Media, Arts and Communication, representing my university, and Vice Chancellor is Ghana. I was dragged kicking and screaming here. I was contacted as chair of Vice Chancellor's Ghana, and I told the organizer that I am no longer the chair. I had handed over a week earlier, but he insisted that I should come. And the current chair said, you have to go and represent us anyway. So I'm here in a dual capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you all. Oh, there's one more. Sorry.
I'm Richard Boadu, the administrator of Ghana Education Trust Fund.
Good fund, okay.
I'm Isaac Esidu Ode. I'm with Kit Fund.
All right. Everybody, right? Okay. You're all welcome. Let me give you Vice Presidents of the Academy, former Presidents of the Academy, Fellows of the Academy, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences. I thank every one of you for honoring our invitation to participate in today's policy dialogue. I'm very pleased to welcome many of you who are familiar with the Academy and its programs, as well as those who are visiting us for the first time. I invite you to enjoy our facilities and consider it as a potential venue for your future events. I'm very hopeful that you will find today's program thoughtful, thought-provoking, enlightening, and stimulating. I'd like to extend a special welcome to the presenter, Dr. Justice Ayam, the reviewers, Professor Moses Okech, and Professor Francis Atuahene, who I believe will be joining us virtually from the UK and USA respectively. And also to our panelists, Ms. Eugenia Akwek, Mr. Kofi Bentil, and Dr. Prince Arma. An impressive group of thought leaders for today's engagement. We appreciate your presence and participation in this policy dialogue. It's also my pleasure to extend a virtual welcome to Ms. Claudia Fratelli, Program Director for Higher Education and Research in Africa for the Carnegie Corporation of New York. This policy dialogue is made possible by a grant awarded by the Carnegie Corporation of New York to support the higher education project of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences. I also extend a warm welcome to the representative of the Bank of Ghana. We appreciate the additional support provided by the Bank of Ghana to our higher education project. And naturally, I recognize Honorable Peter Nochukote, Ranking Member of the Education Committee of Parliament. Welcome. And the GET Fund, we also appreciate you. We are here today to conduct a policy dialogue on financing higher education in Ghana, implications for equity and sustainability. This is the second of 7 policy dialogues that the Ghana Academy is organizing under the project Motivating Higher Education Reforms in Ghana Towards Equity and Sustainability, funded, as I mentioned earlier, by a grant from Carnegie Corporation of New York. This project was developed under the able leadership of Emerita Professor Techua Menu. We thank her and her team for conceptualizing, developing, and managing the GAS Higher Education Project. The goal of the Higher Education Project is to provide a platform for independent persons and groups to reflect on the challenges of the higher education sector on a regular and a sustained basis. Ground paper to assess the policy, followed by a review of the paper and a panel discussion, and finally, an open forum. An interesting aspect of today's engagement is that we are dealing with something that we are all familiar with or have experienced, but we may not have thought about it comprehensively. We usually encounter the challenges of financing higher education from either the perspective of students or as university administrators. Salaries. But that is a big headache for private university vice chancellors and deans. Ghana has a tax-based system to fund infrastructure for public universities, but allocation can be inefficient, insufficient, delayed, or politicized. The current fundraising model, the current funding model raises important equity and sustainability questions. How do we expect private universities to fund their infrastructure and faculty salaries? How do we ensure an equitable and transparent GET fund allocation for public university infrastructure? And is the GET fund system subject to rent-seeking or corrupt practices by virtue of scarcity and centralization? How do we expect the poorer students to pay for their tuition and boarding fees? It is also evident that the system is unsustainable against stagnant economic growth, high inflation, forms and ideas for financing higher education in Ghana. The list of participants is impressive. People who know a lot about the possibilities and shortcomings of the current financing system of higher education. I believe we are all going to be enriched by this policy dialogue. I also hope that this policy dialogue will open up new opportunities for the participants or their organizations to collaborate with the Ghana Academy on projects of mutual interest. I welcome you and wish you an exciting and productive technical session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. So we'll invite you now to step out into the foyer for the group picture, and then when we return, we'll have the coffee break, and then we will very well. Before we step out, we will ask those who just joined to introduce themselves. They will step out for the group photograph. Microphone, please.
Good morning. My name is Kofi Asare. I work with EduWatch. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. My name is Peljadan Ponsa. I represent the African Center for Economic Transformation, ACES. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. My name is Chemio Pondani, NUC's president.
Good morning. My name is Justice Wiafisa Kodie, Director of Finance and Administration, Student Loan Trust Fund.
Thank you very much. So please, let's step out for the group photo, come back for coffee, then we can resume our seats for the technical session. Thank you very much.
So, you're thinking about promoting your business on Spotify, but not sure how to start. Creating audio ads. Don't sweat it. You can make audio ads for free when you run a campaign on our self-serve advertising manager, Spotify Ad Studio. It's this easy. Write a script, pick a background track, then our team of experts will record the ad for you. Sounds good? Search online for Be Heard, B-E space H-E-A-R-D to get started.
And policy conversation. The first
your hand.
So I want to thank you once again on behalf of the Academy for joining us this morning as we deliberate on this very important topic. I'm informed that we have been joined by Dr. Yaira Chirakosi, Director, Tertiary Education, Ministry of Education. If you can just wave. You're very welcome. Go ahead. And there is somebody by you, Francis, who didn't introduce himself. I saw him, so he can't escape. No, that same one. Don't worry. Yeah, there he is. Here's you. Please wait. We are bringing you the mic.
Thank you very much. I'm Hansin Obriaboa. I'm the TUTAC chairman for ATU. I'm representing TUTAC over here. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know that we have participants online. We hope you also had your tea whilst we had ours. But we are very pleased that you have made time to join us. I think the President outlined very succinctly for us the challenges that we are faced as far as the financing of higher education is concerned. And we are thinking about it in a broad sense, not only, mainly for public universities, but also for private universities. And there are a whole number of issues that I'm sure you are all burning to contribute to. Before then, we are going to have the presentation of the background paper. I think we shared the executive summary with you in the invitation. I don't know if you managed to read it, but I would urge that we listen carefully to our consultant as he presents his findings, which will then form the basis for the panel discussion and the open forum that we are going to have. I think that for us, the importance of this project is in being able to create this forum for different stakeholders to meet, to discuss on very pertinent issues. We all see these issues from a particular perspective. So if you're a student leader, your first thing is about fees, academic facility user fees, residential facility user fees. If you're an administrator, you see it very differently. You know, how you're going to balance all of those kinds of things. You walk around the campus and you see the facilities and you know what the state of the lecture rooms. If you are in Get Fund, everybody is looking up to you. And you are like Father Christmas. Meanwhile, the expected disbursements may not have flown into your accounts. If you are the student loans officer, your perspective is also very different. So what we want to do is to bring, and then if you are sitting in Parliament, you are the Parliamentary Committee on Education, what do you do with this, you know? If you are a regional minister, your people are coming to lobby you. We've got a region now, when are we getting our university? So again, there are different issues, and the Get Fund administrator is scratching his head and saying, hey, they are going to build one more university. Where will we get the money for this? So this is what we hope we are creating, this forum, where we can discuss current issues, policies, proposed reforms, and subject it to critical scrutiny, hoping that this will then, in turn, influence policy directions and reforms. So I will now call on Dr. Justice Achwanya Ayam, the consultant, who will have 30 minutes to come to present to us the work that he has done. And especially the recommendations that he ends up with that we will then discuss in the open forum. I see somebody is coming in. I hear that in a particular country that I will not name, one famous woman used to wait until the president was speaking in a public place before she would make a grand entrance, and that ended up being very disruptive, you know. So I think I have seen the Vice Chancellor of UHAS walking in, if I'm not mistaken. Madam, you are extremely welcome. So I've already introduced her. So Professor Lydia Azato, yes. And then we have Prince Hamid Ama, MP for Kwesim. Is it AC Kwesimintim or what? Thank you. So we have Dr. Prince Hamid Ama, MP for Kwesimintim and Vice Chair of the Education Committee of Parliament. Sir, you are very welcome. And Madam Professor Lydia Aziato, Vice Chancellor of the University of Health and Allied Sciences, Ho. Thank you very much. You are very welcome. And you've come in just when the consultant is coming to present his paper to us. So over to you, Doc.
Good morning, everyone. In Ghana today, it is no longer news that many determined yet economically disadvantaged students are caught between aspirations and challenges due to the prevailing higher education funding difficulties. This paper aims to explore how diverse financing strategies This paper aims to explore how diverse financing strategies in higher education can pave the way for a sustained, balanced, and enduring educational future. Distinguished participants, I am honored to stand before you to present the paper titled Financing Higher Education in Ghana, Implications for Equity and Sustainability. IT. The background of the paper can be summarized as follows. Higher education finances encompasses the management of financial resources and expenditure involved in providing educational services, whilst equity ensures fair access and appropriate resource allocation. On the other hand, sustainability demands reliable, long-term funding. Some success has been achieved over the years. Currently, we have 268 private and public tertiary institutions. 88 of them Currently, we have about 268 private and public tertiary institutions. Out of that, 88 of them are private tertiary institutions. We currently have a student population of about 562,877. This figure is likely to increase. Our gross enrollment ratio as at 2020 stands at 90%. We have achieved improved facilities since the 1960s. Policy initiatives such as the establishment of the GTEC, Free Senior High School, Get Fund, among others, have sought to enhance access, increase funding, and promote equity and infrastructure development. Currently, our primary source of funding, higher education in Ghana, is government subvention, which currently stands at 86% per the data available. Tuition and academic facility user fees and other income streams constitute the remaining 40%. The private sector involvement has seen some level of expansion and some introduction of vocational programs, which has led to the increase in access. However, there are issues of quality and accreditation, because some of the private institutions are not properly accredited. The challenges we face in the current funding system is inadequate funding, which negatively affects quality, research, creates infrastructure gaps, limited e-learning resources, and access and affordability issues. In line with the main goals of the paper, these specific objectives were explored to conduct a comprehensive analysis of key higher educational challenges, policies, reforms, and stakeholder roles of the current state of higher education in Ghana, to evaluate the factors that influences the funding of higher education in Ghana, and assess the effectiveness of current funding policies on equity and sustainability, to critically examine the advantages and disadvantages of Ghana's current higher educational financing arrangement, and propose the potential solutions or reforms, to assess the scope and consequences of the financing gap in Ghana, and to identify potential mitigation strategies. 5, to identify and evaluate available funding sources and emerging trends that can be deployed by the institutions in Ghana in higher education financing for Ghana, with the focus on enhancing equity and sustainability. And finally, to synthesize the findings from objectives 1 to 5 and provide recommendations for future higher education financing policy in Ghana that promotes equitable and sustainable funding of higher education. The literature review is twofold: the theoretical perspective of financing higher education and the mixed financing model for higher education. By way of introduction, educational finance encompasses the management of financial resources in education through the allocation of funds, time, infrastructure to achieve the desired goals, considering the financial values and the trade-offs. With regards to the theoretical perspectives, the literature discusses two main theories: the new institutional theory, which requires that a financing arrangement strategically responds to external pressures and the environment. In this regard, higher education institutions are expected to adopt socioeconomic changes and align with societal norms and values. On the other hand, the public choice theory incorporates market dynamics into higher educational resource allocations. The theory promotes efficiency, cost effectiveness, and drives responsiveness. Mixed financing is a blend of public funds, private investment, and student contribution. It enhances financial stability, reduces dependence, widens access and affordability. It fosters innovation and collaboration with the private sector. However, it has its own attendant challenges. Disparities in equity and access requires that higher educational institutions should focus on affordability and scholarships to promote equal opportunity for students, whilst enhancing the governance systems in the various schools and also ensuring that regulation is well streamlined to ensure transparency. Two case studies come into mind, and these are worthy of note: the Australian mixed financing model and that of the UK financing model. These are case studies that we can explore further. The methodology adopted document analysis to analyze and gather to gather and analyze documents and data relating to higher education financing in Ghana utilizing various sources. The research preferred document analysis to subject expert interviews because of its rigorous current evaluation of content evaluation of documents relevant to the study focus. The main sources of the documents that were used in the research are tertiary education statistics, legal and policy documents, books, peer-reviewed journals, financial statements from some public investors that were available, government reports, some World Bank reports, UNESCO Institute for Statistics reports, and data and reports and data from the Ghana Ministry of Education. Our search, or the study search strategy and selection criteria, used Boolean operators and snowballing to filter for accuracy and aligning the search results with its objectives. The search strings shaped the selection criteria and fine-tuned the results in the end. NVivo 11 software aided the coding and analysis and the extraction of themes. In order to ensure the credibility and reliability of the study outcome, data triangulation was undertaken by cross-referencing a number of numerous sources to understand the various perspectives. The study encountered some difficulties in assessing data or information from the Ghana Tertiary Education Commission and some, in fact, majority of the public higher educational institutions. The analysis of the study, the background paper, is in twofold: the current higher education financing system in Ghana and the emerging trends and opportunities available. With regards to the current financing system, the results showed that the growing number of tertiary education in Ghana has triggered an assessment of the current funding schemes to understand the trends. At the moment, government remains the main funding source through subventions, grants, subsidies, and tax breaks. The results also showed that there's a gradual shift towards alternative funding due to budget constraints and demands. Traditional government funding is supplemented by tuition fees in most of the cases, and then philanthropy and private investment. Now, government limited capacity prompts most of the institutions in Ghana to increase fees. However, increasing fees has a direct burden on students, whereas it creates dependable funding but raises access and affordability issues. The results further reveal that there is an increased involvement in foundations, NGOs, individuals, and funding in the current dispensation. Private investment recognizes growth potentials, assesses and eases pressures on government. However, balancing commercial interests and public interests is a challenge. The drawbacks that was enumerated, that was found in the analysis, include insufficient government funding, which hampers quality, higher financial burden on students, which limits access, and lack of adjustable funding mechanism, which affects sustainability or stability. The results further indicated that Ghana's higher education role Ghana's higher education role is vital, but achieving equity and sustainability is a challenge with the current funding regimes due to the erratic government subventions. And when I say erratic, I mean unstable government subventions that the releases are not very stable. Students' loan schemes not structured on needs basis, the weaknesses in the student scholarship schemes. These factors affect directly equity and sustainability. Government policies and priorities, the factors impacting on higher education financing include government policies and priorities, the economic conditions existing in the country at the moment, the demographic trends, the competition for resources, and the political considerations at the time. With regards to cost of higher education in Ghana, the results showed that from the perspective of students and parents, public higher education institutions charges an average of 1,400 and 2,100 as tuition fees, whilst private higher education institutions charges between 5,000 and 9,000 as tuition fees. These fees does not include hostels, educational materials, and living expenses. However, from the perspective of the higher educational institutions, overall allocation to education over the past 5 years from data available showed that it is 7.8% of GDP, of the overall GDP. Out of that, 26.6%, 26.26% is allocated to higher education. Even with that, from the analysis, there is a whooping shortfall of about 41% funding gap. Now, the results indicated that the main sources of government of financing higher education is government subvention, which stands at 66%. Get fund releases is about 20%. Tuition fees and academic facility user fees, 9%, and the remaining income stream represent 5%. These are analysis from the data available. Now, from the perspective of opportunities and trends in higher education, government subvention remains very relevant. It is the primary funding source for higher education in Ghana. However, the model should aim to attract and retain qualified faculty members, promote research and innovation, provide up-to-date learning, and maintain well-functioning facilities. It is, however, important to work towards streamlining the distribution mechanism whilst strengthening autonomy. The results further indicated that cost sharing is still relevant. This involves household participation in financing public higher education, but the model also promotes accountability and productivity. However, it is important that students' loans and scholarship schemes should be structured to incorporate the needs of students appropriately. The results further reveal that GET Fund has, over the years, effectively improved educational infrastructure, research, and faculty development. However, the challenges include the timely fund disbursement and administrative hurdles, and its uncompleted projects dotted across the various campuses. The results further indicated that endowment financing is an emerging trend which can be deployed or implemented in Ghana. Endowment plays an essential role in funding academic institutions. It enables growth and expansion, research, sustainability through philanthropic contributions and investments. Some notable African countries that have rolled out endowment financing are the American University in Cairo, the University of Nairobi, the University of Cape Town, which have demonstrated that endowment finance is a viable alternative to financing higher education in Ghana. In fact, that of the University of Cairo, currently, and as of the 2017 financial year, has a endowment seed fund of about $541 million. To overcome, go back to the slide. Now, it is important in an attempt to establish or implement endowment finances, to establish a robust endowment culture in Ghana requires strategic approaches like philanthropic campaigns, strong collaborations with the alumni and partnerships, transparent governance system, and overall government support for the funding alternative. The analysis indicated further that income contingent loans is another emerging trend that can be deployed. It ensures access to higher education while considering graduates' future income levels for loan repayment. It offers potential solutions to funding barriers. Now, this is a direct proposal that can be fine-tuned to fit into the current Ghana Students' Loan Scheme, because the loan scheme currently has its own attendant challenges. It has funding issues, low repayment rates affecting the current loan structure, which probably may demand or require that private sector should be involved. And of course, it is also important to look at the management system of these, of the current loan system, if we are to deploy income contingent loans arrangement. To implement income contingent loans, implementing income contingent loans would enhance access in the end and affordability. However, this will require careful planning and regulatory frameworks. Now, means testing is another trend that can be rolled out in Ghana's higher educational financing regime. Means testing determines students' financial needs, leading to the award of institutional scholarships and grants. It enhances access as observed in some African countries, such as Kenya, South Africa, Ethiopia, Tanzania, which are to utilize means testing to improve inclusivity and affordability for economically disadvantaged students in those countries. However, the model requires that there should be available household income data and a transparent criteria for assessing student financial situations. And this is the difficult aspect which has to be explored further. Now, with regards to the analysis of private higher educational financing, the results show that the main income streams for private higher educational institutions is tuition fees, in some cases donations, and some grants and partnership funds. However, tuition fees remains the most important component. It is mainly influenced by programs and the cost, whereas external grants aids research and capacity building. The analysis also revealed that there is a strong collaboration or some level of collaboration or partnership between private higher educational institutions and industry, government, and some non-profit organizations. These collaborations have strengthened access, enhanced research and initiatives. However, to achieve a stable or sustainable endowment will require careful planning by these institutions. The analysis points to the need for direct support in the form of subvention and support through GET-Fund to these institutions. The government subvention should be targeted at staffing costs and research, whereas the GET-Fund support should be targeted at infrastructure and scholarships. This is likely to encourage private-public collaboration. And what are those benefits that will inure as a result of these support coming in the way of private higher educational institutions? Government assistance to private higher educational institutions would improve educational access. It will ease public university burdens. The collaboration drives innovation and quality standards. And public backing would ensure fairness, excellence, and development opportunities. From the analysis, we can derive the following summarized conclusions. Equity aims for resource distribution and equal opportunities, whilst sustainability encompasses responsible resource management and environmental care. From the evaluation or the methodology approach, we utilize diverse sources to assess higher education financing in Ghana. We examine equity and sustainability through legal and policy documents, peer-reviewed articles, reports, and secondary data. The challenges can be summarized as follows: insufficient government funding, limited student loans, inadequate tuition fees, and unstable revenue streams. Policy interventions like the GET Fund, the initiatives of the GTEC, and the Free Senior High School initiatives sought to enhance access, streamline regulations through the active engagement of key stakeholders and the relevant regulatory bodies. Some of the main factors influencing higher educational funding, as I've already mentioned in the analysis, includes government policies, economic conditions, the demographic trend in the country, the competition for resources, and of course, political considerations. We moved on. The drawbacks from the analysis indicate that it includes insufficient funding of higher education, which burdens insufficient funding insufficient funding of higher education, lack of diversity in funding sources, and the solutions could be providing of adequate funding or diversifying the funding sources, and also increasing access to student loans. Private higher educational financing. It is clear that the cost of private higher education limits access and economically disadvantaged students. Limit access to economically disadvantaged students. The strategy we can deploy is that we will have to diversify funding sources, encourage public-private collaborations, and of course, government support. The emerging trends, as we have already discussed in the analysis, obviously include government subventions, which we expect an enhancement, GET Fund, cost sharing, means testing, income contingent loans, and of course, endowment financing. Now, the implementation of solutions to promote quality education and research will require active involvement of stakeholders in strengthening collaboration. Enhancing higher education. Increase funding to match increased enrollment. But as enrollment increases, we expect that funding for these institutions will match accordingly. Strengthen quality assurance through organizations like the GTEC and foster academia industry collaboration for skills alignment and funding opportunities. We should also work to review laws and policies to incorporate mitigation measures to address factors influencing higher education in Ghana. We should work towards diversifying the funding source by encouraging private sector investment and expanding access to student loans for economically disadvantaged students in the country. We should further explore alternative revenue sources such as research output, entrepreneurship, and also prioritize needs-based financing aid and collaborate with industry to enhance teaching quality and curriculum design. Improving existing funding arrangements. It is important to enhance government subvention and also enhance cost sharing and review GET Fund, the GET Fund Act to be fit for purpose. It is also important to explore alternative models like endowment finance, as I've already mentioned, income contingent loans, and the means tested mechanisms. Now, specifically, to implement endowment financing in Ghana, it would require us to develop guidelines that incorporate transparency, donor recognition, investment management, and rigorous engagement of stakeholders through campaigns and fundraising efforts. Again, to roll out income contingent loans, we will have to collaborate with experts for policy and scheme development. Ensure there exists accurate income verification frameworks, structured repayment system, interest rate regime, and collaborate with financial institutions in the management of loan defaults. And one of the challenges of the current student loan trust is the default rate. Now, to roll out means testing as a way of enhancing scholarships and grants, we will have to develop data collection systems, proxy indicators, questionnaires, and also collaborate with government agencies and financial institutions. We should regularly review fees, grants, and scholarships in line with the economic changes. Now, what are the policy alternatives for funding? A performance-based subvention policy for equitable funding, review of the GET Fund Act for timely funds releases, and to include private higher educational institutions, develop funding policies and guidelines for partnerships, endowments, and equitable cost sharing. Now, what's the value proposition for the article? When we have appreciated the current higher educational financing scheme, we will gain a deeper insight into the current funding impact on equity and sustainability, enabling precise solutions. The understanding of the factors affecting higher education funding will enable us to integrate these influences into the alternative funding framework for Ghana. The assessment of higher education institution funding, private higher educational institution fundings, would enable us to establish a stable financing system that would complement public institutions for better access and affordability. The emerging trends would enable us to prescribe performance-based government subvention, reliable GET fund disbursement, targeted and timely student loan based on future earnings, timely granting of scholarships for disadvantaged students, and a robust alumni collaboration. From the article, the following proposed policy options are eminent: implementation of performance-based subvention, GET Fund Act revision, Student Loan Trust Act revision, means testing guidelines, endowment fund, the development of endowment fund framework, tuition fees and academic facility usage fees guidelines for public institutions. We anticipate that the outcome would lead to a broader access and affordability regardless of students. I am grateful to be given the opportunity to be part of this in-depth discussion. I'll welcome your thoughts and insights that will deepen the discourse. Thank you for your attention.
Please let us give Dr. Ayam another round of applause for this exhaustive presentation. I want to state at the outset that we will be having a separate policy dialogue on the GET Fund. So I would urge that for today you hold most of your fire on the GET Fund. We have a whole paper devoted to examine everything. We'll note it, but we'll bank it for now. So the way we worked was that we commissioned these background papers. The background papers are subject to internal review and then external review before presentation. So right now we're going to move to our reviewers who are not here. And one of them is joining us virtually from the UK. And then the other one, because it is too early in the US where he is, he has recorded a video which will be played. So we'll go through that, and after that we'll have our panel discussion. But before then, I noticed Professor Ernest Aite, Fellow of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, former Vice Chancellor, and a key participant in the design of this project working. Professor Aite, you are very welcome. We also have with us Professor Atu Esuman of the Methodist University of Ghana, and I'm sure it was music to his ears when he heard a lot about the private universities and their travails. I saw also a lot of the finance officers shaking their heads very vigorously. Yes, tell them, these are the issues that we are facing. So I know that we are going to have a very spirited debate, discussion when we start the open forum. But for now, Francis, can you have Professor Okech join us? So Professor Okech, Moses Okech is Professor of International Education Policy and Development and co-director, University College London Center for Education and International Development at the University College of London Institute of Education in the UK. So thank you very much, Professor Okech, for accepting to be a reviewer and for joining us this morning from the UK. Francis, where is he? Okay. Yes, he can come on now. I also want to introduce somebody who has been trying to be inconspicuous, but it may be hard. You know, Ghana is part of the committee. Ghana is part of the committee. For those of us in the higher education sector, one of our favorite readings is from the University World News, which brings news of what happens elsewhere. And there is somebody in Ghana who writes for the University World News, and he's joined us this morning, Mr. Francis Kokuche. Thank you very much. He covered our first policy dialogue. And talking about our first policy dialogue, you may have received copies of the policy brief that we developed from the first policy dialogue. A policy brief will also be developed out of this. Of course, these policy briefs cannot do justice to the full sets of issues that are discussed, but it's a teaser, and you can always contact the author or us for more. So thank you very much. Professor Okech can come on now. Professor Okech is originally from Kenya, so he's familiar with the same issues that we are discussing.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, yes. I would like to see you.
Okay, if you can hear me, that's fine, because we're both speaking at the same time. I was just saying that higher education finance is quite topical, and I'm delighted that in Ghana you've decided to have this topic to be discussed at the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences as one of your key areas of work. By background, I'm an education economist, and higher education finance is something I've researched and written about for the last 2 decades. So I've got a bit of interest in it as part of my research interest, but also generally considering the demographics in Africa. And many other parts of the world. Here in the UK, financing of higher education is a big debate because some of the universities have relied quite a bit on international student finance to support universities. In the United States, there's a big challenge now because people are
Pardon? It's still on.
I don't know who is handling the IT from the background and whether you can hear me or not. There's just no clear communication. From my side, I'm quite okay. I've started the conversation. Can somebody confirm that you can hear me?
This is still on. This one. Pardon? Yeah, but he's too fast. If he can slow down. And if somebody can come and put off this one, because it interferes.
Great. There's so much echo from my side. There's a mic which is on, so you'll have to turn it off. Okay, I hope the echo is gone. Because I think the communication is not working very well, so I'll just try to say one or 2 points. First of all, thank you, Dr. Ayam, for your paper, which I enjoyed reading. It covers a number of general issues, but also very specific issues to the context of Ghana. So that was great. It's well written overall, as I said in my review. And I think that you address the challenges quite well, but also you pull out the recommendations in a very coherent way. So I enjoyed those. I mean, it's analytic in many respects. I think 2 points stand out for me when I read the paper. One is the fact that you say higher education should be available at the point of use for most students. So nobody who is qualified and who wants to go to higher education should be able to do so because of cost. And that is actually one of the primary social justice issues around it. And so equity is paramount to any designing of financing method, whether it's mixed method or free higher education, whatever way you want to call it. But I think you cover all those issues quite well in the paper that you've presented. And as I said, when I read it, I gained a wealth of insight from the analysis you provided. You also draw on some of the examples from other parts of the world. You talk about income contingent loans in Australia. You also mentioned the UK. The UK has a sort of income contingent loan method of financing in places like United States. As I was saying before, student loans can be quite tricky, especially if they're not a 49% advantage to going to higher education. But some of these equity issues are not really higher education issues. Some of these equity issues are equity issues that stem from the pipeline from secondary school into higher education. I think that my review can be made available as bits of it. I think you make important recommendations. You discuss a bit about the Ghana Education Trust Fund. I think is quite interesting, and unfortunately I won't be there to listen to it, but I think that's a very interesting way of looking at higher education. You've talked about issues around excessive fees, but you've also talked about the fact that the economy has to grow. If you're going to have any loan scheme model, loan schemes that are based on the idea that graduates will have future income to pay for it. But if graduates can't find jobs after 15 years, 10 years, with sufficient income to pay their loan, I think you do hint to it a bit in your paper, is how we consider higher education. If higher education is a public good, public goods normally benefit current generations and future generations. They play quite a bigger role in society beyond just economic gains. So how does Ghana consider higher education itself within its own society? And these are the issues that I think have to be considered, in my view, when you're designing any loan scheme. But you're right to say that whatever mechanism of financing, it has to be adequate, it has to be efficient, and it has to be sustainable, and it has to be equitable. And these are the key criteria that any financing model that is pursued should follow. Endowments are great if they can be extracted, if the economy grows and institutions can have extra funding for that to support research and other things. Direct tuition fees are very costly in most instances, but parents who can afford and willing to pay for higher education should be able to do that. But I think the whole issue around equity is to design a model whereby somebody who wishes to pursue higher education is not unable to do so because of cost reasons. And that requires that there's a bit of means testing where that is possible. In a large part of Europe, higher education is still largely free. So it's only in the UK and a few other places where higher education is actually financed through other mechanisms. But that is because the way higher education is considered is different. The pathway for higher education is also considered differently. So I think that I just want to say congratulations for writing your paper. Unfortunately, I won't be there for the discussion today, but I gained a huge amount of insight reading it, and the recommendation, the diverse have an engaging discussion throughout the session. I hope my technology worked and that you are able to hear what I'm saying. But again, I want to congratulate the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences for convening a discussion on this topic. Thank you very much, and I wish you a good discussion throughout the day.
Thank you very much, Professor Okech. The acoustics were not always very good. Hopefully, at the end of this project, we will be having an international conference, and we are hoping that people like Professor Okech will be able to join us so that we can benefit more and these dialogues can continue. But we thank him. The next reviewer is Professor Francis Etuahine, who is Professor Public Policy and Administration, Department of Public Policy and Administration, College of Business and Public Management, Westchester University of Pennsylvania, USA, who has written a lot on Ghanaian higher education. Because it's only, 5 a.m., 4 a.m. in the US, we agreed that he would record a video that would be played to us. So we are ready for Professor Etuahine's video. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm glad to be part of this important conversation towards funding higher education in Ghana. Before I begin, I would like to express my appreciation to Dr. Techua Menu and the other organizers of this program for putting this program together. I will also say a big Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm glad to be part of this important conversation towards funding higher education in Ghana. Before I begin, I would like to express my appreciation to Dr. Techua Menu and the other organizers of this program for putting this program together. I will also say a big thank you to Mr. Francis Ankra, who has been working behind the scene, trying to support all of us through this development. I will begin by saying that the author has done a great job in terms of presenting the work that we are all discussing today, and I'm so grateful to be part of this intellectual, academic, and policy conversation in our country. The first thing that I want to say is in terms of the conceptualization and framework of the paper or the research, the author did a great job, an excellent job that needs a commendation in terms of using various examples from different countries to see their applicability in our content. So I am happy that he chose this path by reviewing the literature and showing where some of these best practices are, and probably helping us to actually look into these concepts deeply to figure out what can we do as a country to support our institutions. So thank you so much for this work that you are doing. I mean, this is something that personally is deeply in my heart, that I spent a very good amount of my academic and research life looking into funding regimes in other places and how that can help Ghana. So I am so happy that we are working on it at this point in time. There are so many things that I would say the author talked about, and I would like to shed some light on. One of them is the means test approach and their applicability in Ghana. I think this is one of the best funding strategies that the government can use, and institutions can also actually adapt. The question here is, and that has been one of the things that personally I've been thinking about over the years, anytime we talk about looking for funding strategies, looking for best practices to help support education in Ghana. Now, the means test approach, as we know, is a way that policymakers, is a way that governments use strategies to determine in terms of educational accessibility and affordability, that is the ability to pay. Now, as good as it is, I think it is also driven by availability of data. And I believe that in terms of the framework, the concept, and the current research that we are discussing, the author did an excellent job using examples from countries like the Australian one has been very successful, that so many countries may make reference to. But the success of that also depends on the availability of certain things. For example, reliable source of data. And here, I think this is where maybe future research has to focus on. What are some of the ways, the strategies that the country can use to determine the ability of individuals to pay? If we cannot do that, then it becomes very difficult. So let me give a typical example. A student or a family from one of the remotest part of the country may be considered a disadvantage or someone from the poor socio-economic background because of that area that they are coming from. But that might not be the case, because that student may have a parent or family who are rich farmers, but because their income is not captured by any source of data, we may classify that person as poor. So that is one of the challenges that we have when it comes to using the means test, that's the ability to pay. So the question here is, how do you make that determination in Ghana? And I think, though this might not fall within the framework of this current paper, that is the next level, what we need to start researching into, so that we can actually address the problem right from the basic, the fundamental source. The author also talked about income contingent loans program, and that is also great. Currently, or for the most part that we all know, we've been giving student loans to students not necessarily based on their socio-economic background. And once again, how do you even determine one's socio-economic background? Because there are no matrices that will help us to do that. But there should be discussion on how we're going to do that. And that will help us so that we are not necessarily, as we've been doing in the past, pumping in money to individuals who do not need them. So we can look at it from the other angle. If you look at, and I think the author of this research or the manuscript talk about the free SHS. This is a phenomenal policy framework that the government is embarking. But the question here is, do we believe that everybody in Ghana needs the free SHS, particularly when it comes to the feeding grants that we give them at the boarding school? And because we are not in the position to get the data, we are always supporting even the richest kids, and the poor ones who we have to support the most will always suffer. So even though we talk about the income contingent loan approach, the lack of data sometimes limit our ability to implement the policy effectively and efficiently. And that is where the question is. Once again, this might be outside the domain of this research, but I think future studies should look into that as well. Then we also talk about, the author talk about the creation of endowment and alumni contribution. This is great. When we look at some of the successful institutions, particularly in North America, in the United States specifically, you will see that endowment remains one of the largest funding support for institutions. And in fact, when they are hiring president, apart from they coming in with their strategic opinion about how they are going to support the institution, they want individuals who will be able to raise money. Fundraising is a major component. The universities in Ghana should try to mimic some of these strategies, how to support their institution by raising income. And I think the author made a very good justification, a good case for that. We need to start thinking about creating databases for our alumni. You know, students leave the university and that is the end of it. Unless those group of students actually out of their own volition come together. So the institutions should try to create a foundation where they create the path for success in terms of alumni creation, so that people will come in a formalized way to support their institutions. And obviously, when we talk about income contingent approach, the means test, alumni, and endowment, the question is, can funding higher education always remain the responsibility of the state? There should be a national conversation. Students are actually paying some amount, and we all know that when it comes to fees, students, for the most part, except those who are going through the fee-paying programs, the vast majority of Ghanaian students are not paying tuition. And I think this is where we need to start distinguishing between the concept of tuition and the concept of fees. And once we are able to do that, and we help students to understand that the post-colonial era probably was good because we needed to ensure that we are able to support individuals to lead the various parts of the country. But at this point in time, can government continuously be the major source of funding higher education? And once again, it requires a lot of conversation among students, Ghanaians, policymakers, politicians particularly, and also businesses to support our various institutions of higher education. Thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this conversation, and I look forward to doing more of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Echiahini. You can see that we've tried to be rigorous, we've tried to be inclusive, to bring in, the expertise wherever we may find it. And what is happening is that though some people may be far away, they are following our progress and challenges with a lot of interest. So that is really very heartening. And I hope we are banking some of the comments and that they will reappear later on. So Dr. Ayam, I hope you are also, getting ready. So we have now a panel discussion. We've heard from the consultant, we've heard from the reviewers. We wanted to assemble a panel which would discuss for about 30 minutes some of the pertinent issues. And our panel consists of a very knowledgeable person who is also on the Parliamentary Committee on Education. We contacted the committee, and Prince Ama is going to be one of our panelists this morning. We also have a very vital constituency. In fact, you can see them. They came to fight. They are wearing their batakaris. So we have the president of the National Union of Ghana Students, who will also be joining the discussion. We had invited the World Bank education specialist to join us. So in this case, she's Ghanaian and a woman. She could share with us but they sent us a message this morning. But we have another civil society person here. So I'm going to rope him in to come and join the discussion. So unfortunately, we can see that this room is very gender unbalanced, except for a very formidable table to my right. And one or two notable exceptions. It is the usual, this is what we have, this is the imbalance. Like, it looks like we are in Parliament, right? Only a few nice ladies to join the suits and whatever. So, Prince Ama, Mr. Nooks, Kofi, I'm looking at you. Come and join us here. Okay, so, gentlemen, welcome. You agree with me that we have had a very stimulating presentation this morning. And then our reviewers also raised a number of very pertinent issues, sometimes bordering on the feasibility of some of the proposed solutions. So I'm going to start by just giving you a chance to make some general comments on the theme, and then I'll ask one or two very specific questions to each of you. So we can start with you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Good morning, distinguished persons gathered here. When I look at the theme, it's quite an interesting theme. Issues around equity. If we look at the data available, either from the Ministry of Education or the Ghana Statistical Service, including previous works that have been done by the Ministry of Education on equity analysis, there appears to be imbalance in education participation across the academic ladder, from primary up to the university. But tertiary education or higher education becomes even more prevalent. As to who gets what, the backgrounds of people entering into tertiary education is not encouraging to say. If you take the demography of people who enter into tertiary education, there appears to be evidence that those from the higher quintile, when they start, for example, from KG, they have higher opportunity of getting to tertiary education. And those in the lower quintile very often ends at the secondary school. So this is an interesting conversation that I'm sure will not even end here. The free secondary school policy appears to expand access to secondary education, but that would also mean that you are going to have increased enrollment at tertiary level. If there are no funding opportunities available, then the people from the low background that we wanted to expand secondary education to enable them to also have further education would be at disadvantage because there are no funding opportunity for them. So when I look at the paper, as I said, the topic is quite interesting, and I'm sure that as we delve into the issues, we may amplify some of the major issues that were raised. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Nooks.
All right, a very good morning to us all. First of all, I must say that I'm grateful for the opportunity given, because when you look at the topic under discussion, the students, we are the main body that faces the challenges or the things rolled out by the government or the challenges we are facing in our educational sector. So I think it's a very nice opportunity for us to also register our displeasures and also our worries, so that at the end of the day, we find lasting solutions to this particular canker. It's quite worrying and very disheartening that we still find a chunk of our students deferring each and every semester, and the course keeps coming to our offices, and it's very worrying. And I feel, looking at the well-seasoned stakeholders we are having in this particular meeting, by the time we are done with these discussions or panel sessions, we would have been able to come out with good proposals, so that moving forward things could gradually change moving on. So I must sincerely submit that it's a great opportunity for us to also come here. I'm having the message of over the 12.5 million Ghanaian students here, and I'm going to let our various stakeholders know about it and know the challenges we are going through, and how best we could all join forces together in fighting this cause. Thank you.
No. I'm always in motion. Thank you very much for the opportunity. When I was invited to participate in this discussion, I mean, not this panel discussion, but in this program, I thought that it was going to be the normal tertiary stakeholders, academic dons meet, talk about how to finance tertiary education, how to resource universities, so that they can deliver quality and all that. And that has been the trend that we are used to. But I realized that for the first time, our dons are interested in how equitable access is being facilitated, enhanced, or sustained, which means that they are not just interested in the challenges they go through in running our universities as professional institutions of higher learning, but then they are also worried about issues of inequity or inequitable access to tertiary education, especially by the poor and vulnerable. And that for me is it's a major takeaway from this forum. And I'm happy we are showing that concern at this level. I must admit that it is an area that a lot of conversations have been taking place on, because the assumption is that we have a student loan scheme and then we have a scholarship scheme. But I keep saying that I don't think we have a student loan scheme and a scholarship scheme that is responsive. There are schemes that exist, but they are not responsive because both schemes meet the needs of students after they have become students. Those who are dropping out drop out because they don't even get the opportunity to become students. And so from the onset, once the requirement to participate, whether you benefit or not, is a different issue. Once the requirement to participate, the first requirement is that you must be a student. And it means that a lot of those who do not have money post-WASSCE will not even get the opportunity of becoming a student because they cannot honor their admissions. So perhaps we need to expand the conversation to see how we can make these two schemes responsive. Finally, I wish I would have heard something around accountability. If you read the Auditor General's report, 2021-1, the 21 at least for these two, you will see that the trends in our public universities and technical universities especially is not too nice when it comes to financial irregularities. In the technical universities, for instance, between 2020 and 2021, about 120% increase in irregularities, especially in contracts irregularities. And I think that at the point where tertiary institutions are strategizing about how to raise adequate funding to run the universities and deliver quality, very little should be, our concern shouldn't be much about how to manage those funds. We should be on top of managing the limited funds we have by now. And so a lot of the discussion must also focus on how our institutions can efficiently manage the little and the much funding that we are anticipating to have. Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you very much for your initial salvos. We have just been joined by Ms. Eunice Akwe, who is the World Bank Education Specialist. She did not hear the presentation, but she got the good. So you are ready to join us. So yeah, you sit here. I've taken your seat actually. Okay. So so far we seem to be good. The students are happy with us that they are part of this conversation, and they already warned us. They are quite unhappy, right? We're trying to broaden the discussion to look at the very broad issues, but they've told us, and I'm sure the vice chancellors among you were worried when they saw them that, hey, these people again. So like Kofi Asare said, we're looking at a very broad tableau. We're not looking at just those who are students today, but those who will be students. And I think one of the reviewers pointed out that one of the important issues, especially when we're talking about equity and sustainability, is about demographics. We are the youngest continent. Everybody is aging. We are the youngest, and we are still growing. Okay? We're still growing. So the 568,000 population is going to grow. Okay? And as one of the reviewers said, if we don't link these issues to the growth also in our economy, where is the money going to come from? You can be as unhappy as you want, but if the money is not there, how will you finance? Okay? So we've got the demographic issues, we've got the equity issues, and we've got the sustainability. And I think our presenter was very clear in distinguishing equity from sustainability. We're talking about how you distribute the resources. That's the equity. The sustainability is the management, of those resources. So that is where the accountability issues also come in. But we need to really look at the very broad issues. So I want to focus the conversation on the models that we have been operating. Okay, so A lot is government, Get Fund, tuition. You heard the proportions. You can always remind us. How much is government providing? 60%, 66%. How much is private tuition? 9%. Fees and academic facilities, 9%. And then Get Fund, 20%. And the remainder is 5%. So I want to start with you, Honorable. Is this a sustainable model?
Thank you, Prof. I think that in an era of constricted budget, where there's so much fiscal strain on the government, anytime you have funding up around 60%, 70%, it becomes a challenge. It becomes a huge challenge. Because then the government sends ceilings within which the universities can operate. Sometimes these ceilings may take account of only emolument for faculty members. What then happens to issues of infrastructure and other requirements from the university? So obviously, issue of sustainability comes here. It's quite difficult. So we need to look at alternative ways of financing. The universities on their own are doing a lot. And a lot of IGFs are being generated from the universities. The occasions that the committee has met some of the universities, it appears that the IGF component is like a closed book. But it's an area that really we have to open that book and really look at, because they are all for part of the financing of the universities. And if we were to accumulate this funding, you would realize that it is quite considerable. The universities elsewhere look at how they can commercialize the skills that the universities have, the skill sets that they have, venturing into other income-generating ventures that can support the university's operations. Because over-relying on the government, each year the government sets a particular ceiling, and if they are unable to provide those funding, then it becomes a challenge to those universities. So alternative financing approaches need to be looked at. One of the areas I think the government can look at is providing a specific quantum of money, for example, as a grant to the universities. And then the universities then look at how, beyond the academic user fees that they take from the students, how they can support.
So these block grants, would it include for emolument?
The block grant would exclude emolument. Because once you put in the emolument, that becomes the ceiling. The lecturers have to be paid, and you don't want strikes all over the place. So a specific emolument, a specific grant given to the university, then they work around it. But we also have to look at, as a nation, how we can create institutions that can generate resources to support the universities, like these particular organizations. In the UK, you have councils. For example, the Economic and Social Research Councils, which fund a lot of the students and a lot of the universities, because they are specific national funds that are available for such organization. I think that the issues around our National Research Fund has to be revisited and see how government can support the universities through some of these funding approaches as well.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll come back to that during question time. So, Mr. Chairman, we're talking about the models, and I'm asking whether they are sustainable. One of the reviewers was asking, can we continue the way that we have been going?
Right, so basically I feel if we are going to take higher education serious in our country, then I think the current models we are using should be reviewed. Currently,
should be what? Reviewed?
Reviewed. Currently, last week I was having a meeting with some DCs on their percentage they get to fund most of their educational staff on their district. And it was quite astonishing that some of them were saying the percentage assigned to them by the government is like almost 5% of the amount of monies given them by government. And looking at that 5%, it clearly tells you that the commitment the government has given education is not that high. So probably if we want to be seeing a lot of changes in our higher education, there should be some changes when it comes to the allocations.
So we've just been told that government is providing 66%. So and we are trying to limit ourselves to higher education. What should change?
All right. Basically, looking at the suggestions that has been made, looking at external sources and all this, a very good point. But if you are looking at external sources of getting funds to fund our higher education, you should critically look at our internal issues. Basically, we've not been able to deal with our internal issues, and now we are looking at external issues. Issues with student loan trust fund, issues with get fund, as we continuously say, because if we're able to solve this particular canker, we'll be able to expound on how we could pull a lot of external sources to come. Else, if we get external fundings, you encounter same challenges we are facing with get fund. We encounter same challenges we are facing with student loan trust fund. So if we're able to solve these particular issues, get fund on capping, student loan transfer, and be paid the amount of money is due them, and things are working out there, then we could clearly see that we could put pragmatic plans in place to also get other sources of funding as well. And I want to say this, though we are working on a paper to really tackle get fund issues. When
we do the get fund, you can come and do that. But today, we are looking at the situation where from what the consultant told us, 66% of the financing for higher education is coming from government. Yeah. That is separate from the get fund funding.
That's true.
And then 9% is coming from tuition and stuff, you know. Should that 9%, should it be a bigger pot?
The 9% alone itself can't really cater for most of the things you want to see. It still sends us back to the fact that we should be looking at how we could put structures in place to get other sources of funding to fund our higher education. A clear example was stated in the paper, looking at other alumni body and others who could also be of help to help in our educational sector, looking at external sources. As we are using Australia and UK as a case study, we should get to the time where we've been able to put structures in place, where Ghana could also be cited as an example that today, when you are mentioning the names of UK and Australia, Ghana could also be included. If Ghana should be included, then we should be able to critically analyze the systems being used by these so-called cited organizations or countries, then we also adapt the same system, and I do believe it's going to help us.
Okay. Kofi, should our models change?
Yes, I think the model should change, and I mentioned the first change, that it should change first along the lines of having a responsive, equitable financing mechanism that takes care of the poorest of the poor. As I said, we don't have any financing scheme that ensures that poor people after second cycle are able to transit to tertiary once they qualify. We don't have it. The scholarship system we have is a politicized one that is dished out to political favorites. It's a political reward mechanism, and that is how it has been designed since I became an adult. 2, the student loan scheme is designed for students. The politicized scholarship scheme is also designed for students. But those we should be concerned about shouldn't be only students who drop out, but prospective students who don't get the opportunity to become students after secondary school. And so we need to remodel and refocus these interventions such that they support prospective students to become students and not students after they become students. Okay? Now, generally, yes, there is an aura of, financing deficits in the education sector. As we speak, we are doing about 3.2% of GDP to education instead of the minimum of 4%. At the point we're doing, in 2011, 2012, we're doing 6% of GDP. What we've realized and I'm situating this within the broader context of limited financing. If there are limited funds, if there is limited funding of education, obviously it will affect tertiary. Between 2011 and 2022, the economy has increased by over fourfold. Between 2016 and now, it has increased by almost twofold. But what we've realized is that the increment in GDP, increment in growth, has not been greeted with a corresponding increment proportion-wise in investment in education. And so when you do the analysis, you realize that more and more of what used to come to the social sector, i.e. education, is now finding its way into the energy sector, supporting energy sector cost recoveries or under recoveries. This year, we are spending about 23 billion on energy sector inefficiencies. More or less, we are using 23 billion of our budgeted revenue, or our budget, to pay for people who are not going to pay their electricity bills, to keep our lights on. But that is almost equivalent to how much we are allocated to education, 24.3. So you see, there is generally, the economy has expanded various folds, but the share of GDP that we are committing to education keeps shrinking. And until we are able to be efficient in managing our finances within the economy as a whole, it will be difficult to deploy the 4 to 6% we need. If we are doing 6% of GDP to education, and for instance, we are not doing 23 billion this year on energy sector inefficiencies, I'm sure this discussion would have been a different one. And so we must be concerned not just about what happens within the education sector by way of prudent management of funding, but we must appreciate that the sector is one envelope. What happens in one aspect of the envelope affects the other aspects. And so we must be concerned about general prudent economic management, especially the energy sector, which is the major basket. When I say basket, I mean we are fetching water in that basket that we need to plug. Then more resources will be availed or available to finance education. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, you obviously need to have a conversation with this man. Ms. Akwe, yes.
Thank you very much.
So, as you answer this question, I hope you will also bring in the models from elsewhere.
Which one?
The models from elsewhere, from around Africa,
well,
or lower middle income countries generally.
Well, I just wanted to focus on one thing, and that is income generation, IGF, from the universities. And I wanted to, I've been thinking about this quite a bit. It's almost as if once you generate internally generated funds, you are punished for it. It's not an incentive, because what happens is that once we see that you have this amount of money, then we shrink the other parts that are coming from government. And I think it's very important that that element of trust is established between universities and government. There will always be competition. I always say this. If you look at the returns to education, the argument is always for basic education. And so they'll tell you the base,
the World Bank has stopped saying
the base is broad. The base is broad, and the unit costs are small. So at least do it for everybody, so that once they get to tertiary, it is a choice, not a mandate. And so I would think that, there has to be more incentives for internally generated funds. We can't use these models continually. It's not sustainable, and therefore there has to be a start. I'm not saying that the start will be that immediately the university will start paying their remuneration for their lecturers and non-teaching staff. No. But there has to be this talk of autonomy and a gradual, phasing into a state where the universities control a big chunk of their funds, which will be internally generated funds, and then that can then be used to support, the freedom to be able to use that to support education. I listened to the earlier presentation looking at means testing, income contingent, and endowment funds. And I would say I agree with the earlier presenter that we just don't have the data for that. I mean, there have been ways in which we've tried to look at that. Which are the poorest, the districts with the highest poverty indices, for example. Which schools did you attend? Did you attend a public school in a village and suddenly you don't have money? Suddenly, or did you attend a private school that charges maybe 5,000 Ghana cedis a term, and suddenly you come to university and you don't have money to pay that? So there has to be a way in which we gradually, look at the background of students, which schools they are coming from. It will not be perfect. I mean, I'll say that. Unless we have all the data we need to do proper means testing, it will not be perfect. But there has to be a start. And that's where I would like to end.
Thank you very much. So Professor Aite had a comment that before he said he had to leave, but he left me with a comment that before we make any decisions on how higher education should be financed, we should know how much it costs. What do you think? And how will we know how much it costs? There are vice chancellors here. Maybe they can tell us how much it costs. And yes, how much does it cost, and for what kind of education? When you go to buy a shirt, there are many shirts there, right? Maybe you want a suit. Maybe you want to look like Professor Tego. So how do you make that decision? How much should it cost to educate our students?
Yeah, so I'm not sure whether we're talking about, is it academic cost? Everything.
Yeah, when you said it, you said we should ring fence emoluments. But to what extent do you ring fence emoluments? Because sometimes it means that you can't hire new people, right? Unless somebody goes, you can't hire because we can't pay. So even your block grant, you have ring fenced it. It's only for that, but the government. So how many teachers do you go and submit to the government that we need to employ this many lecturers? Is that just a given,
Well, I think that, yes, before you can talk about financing, you have to cost. Certainly, you have to cost to be able to know how much you need to be able to finance. The data available is not too much clear, the cost of higher education. We have some estimates for higher education, but certainly we have to be able to cost how much per it costs to educate one person, and then to be able to estimate how much then government can put in and how much then the universities themselves through their IGF can invest. Because the important thing is to agree that government alone cannot be able to finance higher education. Otherwise, the improvement, the quality improvement that the universities are requiring will not be achieved. It will be a facade. So the third sector participation, which is the universities themselves, raising resources to be able to support the government, is an area that we have to be able to look at. I think the academy may want to commission a study in the costs of higher education. That would be an interesting area to look at, because as we speak now, the data is all over the place.
It says if you bring the money, they'll do it.
The data is all over the place. Some suggest 1,500, it costs 2,000. So it's all over the place. We don't have, and the problem we have in this country is the lack of data. So lack of data makes it difficult for us to even to plan, and lack of data, and in fact, data from other sources, depending on what source the data is coming from, the figures are different. So yes, to be able to talk about financing, it's important that we are able to cost. And then once we do the costing, we then look at what the various players' contribution will be. And I'm sure that will be helpful in going forward.
Okay, so Mr. Chair, you want to respond to that? Yeah.
Yes, the costing is a complicated thing. I was just whispering to my colleague about norms. What are the norms for costing? If you take a medical student, how much time would they spend on a cadaver? And what is the cost of that? If you take a chemistry student, what chemicals would they need? And I think the costing is really important, because once we delve into the norms that should be, that ensure the quality of the education that we are giving, and then the cost of it, then we can decide that this one costs so much that we need 3 of that. And this one, we need it in the next 5 years. So it's a modest cost and we need 100 of that. So then that issue of how many will be training also comes in, Prof. Because you can't just do cost and then leave it like that. In fact, right now, it's almost like we are implementing blind, because we are just, maybe depending on the number of lecturers we have, we get more students, or the classrooms that we have, we get more students in there, or the labs. Oh, we just built a new lab, we can have more engineering students. But really, it must be something that is very decisive. Yeah.
I think the cost, what Honorable is saying is the reality. The reality is that we haven't done any composite costing yet for tertiary education. We have similar ones for basic and secondary done. You realize that there are broadly two kinds of costs for tertiary education. There is the cost of tertiary education to government. That is the 7 to 8 billion that you have allocated by government, including all sources from government, GET Fund, GOG, that you have allocated. Okay, so someone will say that's the cost. Yeah, but that's the cost to government, 6 to 7 billion cedis. And then we have the cost to the student, okay, in terms of the tuition fees and then the accommodation and then the learning support, books and all that. So that deliberate effort, must happen. Perhaps if we cost our tertiary education and we know how much it costs to the student, we would know how much is needed to be called a responsive grant, student loan scheme, or a scholarship scheme. But my experience about how much, because we know how much government pays to the tertiary, okay? About 25% of the budget goes to tertiary. We have an idea about 7 to 8 billion maximum. But to the student, I am involved in fact, I am a philanthropist. I support a lot of students on scholarship. And I look out for orphans at WASI level and support them. I've been doing this for about 12 years, okay? Now, what I can tell you is that averagely a science student will spend about 15,000 cedis a year in school. That's how much I spend on those that I support, 15, and I do 360 supports, you understand? So, that's if you're not fee paying. If you are not fee paying, you do about 15,000 a year. So it's a bit expensive, because look at the student loan, how much, 3,000? It has no correlation with the real needs. And for that matter, even if you are in school and you are being supported, it's likely you may drop out. So that's costing, it's not that it's important, but it's important to inform the design of our student loan scheme and other schemes meant to support the poor to enjoy quality tertiary education, and also support our institutions to get the needed funding to run as professional ones. Thank you.
All right, so I also touch on the question. I feel it's linked to the fact that it all has to do with data. You see, in costing, finding funds to see to whatever thing we do, we should be having the data at our disposal. We should know that a medical student, the amount of money a medical student spends throughout his or her 6 years in school. you should know that a teacher training student in so-and-so college spends this amount of money and goes through this process. If you're able to analyze all this, you will know that this is the percentage or the quota the government is bringing. This is the quota coming from the student. Then you can know the amount of money or the quota left that you could be adapting ways and means to fund that particular quota. If that happens, it makes the systems very smooth. Because if you don't have the data at our disposal, we continue to sit and talk a lot of stuff. But if you're having the data at our disposal, we know this is the actual issues on grounds. This is what the government is bringing on board. This is what the student is supposed to pay. This is the deficit. So now the deficit, how do we find ways and means in ensuring that this is also going well? Then, looking at the data, the percentages and all these indicators, you could know that if you are going by internally generated funds, fine. If you are going by this particular source of fund, fine. Then we put all together and everything goes on well. But until we have the data, we've not started. Thank you.
Thank you. So I know that we could sit here and talk about a whole lot of things, but we need to also bring in the audience. I'm going to ask the consultant to join us up on stage. And I'm going to open up the discussion to all of you so that we can go away with some responses, some policy choices. I think that, I think it was the consultant who said that a lot of the issues, please take it to the first one. It's also about the government priorities and also a lot of politics, okay? So we're talking about sustainability, we're talking about equity, etc. And one equity mechanism has been this one region, one university. But it does have massive costs. So if we're struggling now with what we have, and like Mr. Asare invited us, let's not just think of the university sector. Let's think of the economy as a whole and how what happens in one sector affects the ability to fund other sectors, okay? So it's not just by magic. So at the same time as your economy is expanding, the proportion of your GDP that is going to a particular sector is going down. So what does that mean? That has implications for equity also, and also for the sustainability of the institutions. So now I want to open up. There are a lot of practitioners here. I saw the directors of finance who must, and a lot has been made about the IGF. Personally, I'm not as optimistic about all the magic that IGF can perform, but maybe I can be persuaded, you know. So, who is coming first? Yes, Mr. Getfund.
Thank you, Madam. In the presentation, I saw that Getfund has been mentioned over and over and over. Yes.
This is our Father Christmas.
It looks like, yeah, that is it. One thing that I want us to actually get in our mind that Getfund is not a Father Christmas entity. Secondly, with the present uncapping of Getfund, present capping of Getfund, all the beneficiaries of Getfund should know that we are not in normal times. And the heads of institutions and then the beneficiaries should start thinking innovatively. It's something that has to go down for every one of them to know that it is not the Father Christmas season again. So you should find innovation ways of raising funding in your universities. I belong to 2 universities. One of them has started, and he made mention, they've started the alumni support system where you just do the MOMO and then you contribute a little to it. 1.2 is also looking at your picture just being put on an area and then you pay money for it. These are little things that can help. In the secondary school, we have a system where all students contribute. Why is it that the tertiary sector, nothing of that sort, is catching up? This is by the by. But I would like to talk about the mean testing that he spoke, the presenter spoke. It is very difficult doing that in our setup. We operate a scholarship scheme, and surprisingly, about 2 years ago, we call the students that have actually been shortlisted. They came, and to be frank, all the students that came in, it's either that their father is dead, their mother is dead, or they are pensioners. And we look at the age bracket, and later on we were deliberating, why is it? Is it that they know that we are going to ask them this particular question in order to pull them down? But it was later on that it dawned on me that the age bracket, most of them, their fathers are on retirement. Between age 25 to 30, their parents are either out of service. And that is one thing that came there. So if you're going to use the mean testing, and this is something that should be your criteria, it's a bit difficult. And they were saying, we don't even have the data to do that. If you look at the Get Fund Act, we have a clause in it that says that brilliant but needy student. Now, how are you going to check if the student is brilliant and his need assessment? That is one problem that also comes in. And for that part, I will leave you and then go to Mr. Kofi, who is he's my namesake. And he made mention that, I'll speak for Get Fund. He made mention that scholarship is political in nature. But on the 7th of November, we do stakeholders meeting. Last year we did it here. We're coming back again this year. For them to, the perception that they have on Get Fund. And I tell you, it's not like that. Because the scholarship that we did last year, students that got 4 A's and above, everybody who applied got it. We lowered it to gender parity for the ladies. And for them to, those above grade A, 3 grade A's, all of them have it. So if you're running a system based on that, how do you target as a political sort of scholarship? I'm coming to do a presentation on that and you see it, how transparent the system is. I always come and then debunk some of these notions that they have. But until then, I'll leave you for you to come that day. I'll invite you for you to come. We've had a system, and I tell you, it's very transparent in terms of scholarship award. And you will see what the report and whatever on that day. But I would like to thank he's done a good job. And for me, I will still say that the universities and then the tertiary institutions should be innovative in finding ways to help the infrastructure. There are a lot to be said, but until your policy analog, you said a policy or dialogue or something, we'll come and then talk about that.
Thank you.
Okay,
so
thank
we'll
you.
go to this table over here. Yes. I saw 3 hands. Yes.
So you deal with all the three hands. Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to...
Please reintroduce yourself.
Okay.
Those who came late know who is speaking.
My name is Eric Defo, and I'm here on behalf of the Association of Ghana Industries. So I will be presenting an industry perspective and how we've become disconnected with academia. The first thing is, it looks like this discourse so far has been targeted more towards equity than the sustainability. And for us in industry, sustainability comes in from the beginning. What model are you running? And how do you sustain the model? If your model is that you should get sustained funding from government, it will fail. So we are in an era where education is no longer a social enterprise. It's a commercial enterprise. So your books must balance. If you're always running at a deficit, you end up like Ghana. So how are you balancing your books? For industry, we don't have any incentive to support education. There's a misconception that we have tax rebates. It is not attractive. What actually happens is that if you invest in education, that amount that you've invested is not taxable. But the real effect is that you only benefit from the amount of tax that would have been applied to the amount you've invested. So for example, if I invest 1 million cedis in education and the tax rate is 35%, my benefit is a saving of 350,000. But in reality, 650,000 of my profit is gone. So the higher education institutions must innovate to attract industry. There should be something more than that. If we don't get any long-term benefits in supporting education, our industries are profit motivated. We have social, corporate social responsibility budgets, but we will choose how we will apply them. But for us, when we talk of sustainability, when you invest once, you don't go back. So there was a mention of a grant system. The universities should be able to develop models where they say, if I get 2 billion cedis coming into my coffers, I'm not coming back to government for money anymore. Then government can look at it and say, we're spending so much every year. If we can take money from our oil resources and throw it at the tertiary institutions and then wean them off, is something they may consider. If you bring proposals to industry where we are able to get long-term benefits, for example, a scholarship scheme for an institution that invests a certain amount in your education, we will find the people to come in and benefit from that scheme. Such incentives, which is long-term. For example, I was just a bit disappointed that Professor Aite left. Your infrastructure, how are you funding it? What is the incentive for a business entity to go and invest in infrastructure? If you want to start taking money from the beginning because you're giving me land, forget it. I'll buy it somewhere else and build. You need to give concessions. Maybe we're giving you land for 10 years, we're not taking anything, come and build, recoup your investments, and then we have a sharing arrangement going forward. 10 years will come in the twinkle of an eye. So the modeling of the funding structure of the universities must be reconsidered. And I'm sure if you engage with industry and private enterprise, they can help. Another thing we must take cognizance of is that we should test our systems. I think in Ghana, in general, we spend a lot of money on inefficiencies. And just throwing money at the inefficiency will not resolve the problem. How efficient are the universities being run? I've heard about procurement breaches. How do you eliminate those things? Once you begin to solve those problems, you realize that you're saving a lot of money that can go into expansion. But if you just allow things to be as they are, we are not going anywhere. So let's look at the models we develop. We should change it completely, and we must be more innovative than even importing other models from other countries and saying this person has done it. Our baseline data is different. So we may have those challenges where we need to reinvent the wheel. And I think that would help us to come in and partner with HE. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Fortunately, we do have people who have run universities here, former and current, so they can also share some of the experiences with us. And interestingly, we did invite several of the banks to join us, commercial banks, and the central bank to join us for this forum. So we'll hear from them also. The lady next to you, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Soraya Bantama. I am the National Union of Ghana Students Secretary for Women's Development. First of all, it is very disheartening to hear that the chair stopped my president from talking about Get Fund. I mean, we are students, and I don't think that we should be oppressed. Yes. Yes, please. But I don't think that we should be oppressed when it comes to Get Fund because we are students. And that is one of our prior concerns. And also, I do not believe that Get Fund is not Father Christmas. Get Fund is not, I mean, free SHS is actually funded by the government. And that's why it's free SHS. So if we as university students, it is like you mentioned that we get scholarship like it's for the intelligent but needy students. So I do not think that we should say that Get Fund is Father Christmas because yes, we have free SHS and then higher education too can be funded some way or the other by the government. And I also believe that if all stakeholders should actually lead the students front, if all stakeholders and students should actually lead a demonstration to campaign against the capping on the Get Fund, I think it would be very nice because I do not believe that we should just sit in very enclosed areas and talk about Get Fund and the capping of Get Fund, but why don't we put more actions to it? Thank you.
All right. I'm Salamatu Duchi. I want to look at two sides, the financial side. I'm thinking that as a country, we must begin to look at the pool of students as a market. Because when you get to the tertiary level, it's like you are the cream. You are preparing to enter industry. So if we are able to see the tertiary level students as a product, and we are able to sell that product, then you can have the financial institutions coming. So even the fact that you have an admission, that should be your collateral because you have an admission to a tertiary institution. Then if we are able to have structures for repayment, because the whole thing, if you look at the challenges you mentioned about, it's really about the repayment. Because the pool of money that is in SNIT, the Student Loan Trust, is the revolving fund is not working because they give out the money and the repayment is very low. So every time they are pumping fresh money into the pool. So how do we deal with the repayment and make even what we currently have sustainable? And I think that we can begin to work with the structures that are coming up, which is the National Identification Card. Because if you look at US and things, if you have a social security number, immediately you start working. You start paying tax. And since we are trying to link the National Identification Card with our TIN number, we should be, as a tertiary institution, should begin to work with industry. And SNIT, even the SNIT fund should begin to work with industry, such that when immediately somebody takes the loan and then starts work, the same way that you are paying tax is the same way that your loan repayment starts. It kickstarts. And so it is taken from the industry from source and paid back. If the system becomes seamless, so that, because I remember when I was young, my SNIT, in fact, I remember to pay when the person who guaranteed me was going on retirement and told me, oh, I'm going on retirement, so please pay and clear me. So if the SNIT is following up on the guarantors, why is it not following up on the beneficiary, those who have taken the money? So we can begin as a nation to make use of the identification process that we are trying to generate, link it up to our TIN numbers, and then link it up with industry so that the money is deducted from the employer directly and repaid. Even if we are able to concentrate on just that, then the SNIT, the student loan trust, enough. It is able to repay itself. It's enough to cater for some of the solutions, the challenges that we have. And then our brother was talking about the fact that it deals with students and not potential students. So that's what I was saying, that the fact that you've got an admission, you've become a good product that can be sold. So even your admission letter should be a guarantee for a bank. But then if we are able to ensure that there is repayment, then the banks will be interested in this product, because for the banks, it's really about repayment, getting my money back. So we should begin to see students as good products that we can sell to the financial industry. And the only way we can sell them is to package them well, and the packaging is repayment. And we can do repayment if we are able to make use of our identification system, which we are currently, as a country, trying to create. That's my suggestion.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, the consultant, for the good work done. And what keeps me...
Please reintroduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Justice Sarkodie, Director of Finance, Student Loan Trust Fund. Okay. And what keeps me at night is what he talked about. I'll start from the repayment of student loan. I think we do exactly that. A student loan, once you start work, immediately the repayment kicks in, because we use the SNIT database, and once you start work, you need to pay your pension. And SNIT will notify student loan, and right away we send a bill to the employer for the deduction to be done. So we are, I don't want to go to our challenges, but it's all about funding. That delays, and the students will be at our premises all the time asking for their loans. But incorporating the needs of the student in the amount. So student loan, we pay a minimum of 2,000 Ghana cedis and a maximum of 3,000 Ghana cedis.
Is it per year?
Per year, per academic year, which is, I know, is not enough.
No, I just want to know.
But we use the mean testing as a way of assigning amount to. Maybe we can look at the robust of it as a separate, but since 2012, we have been using the means testing. I think the issue is with verifying the questionnaire that the student answer. For instance, if you say your parent is not working, how do we verify that? If you lost one of your parents, so these days we ask them to produce death certificate for us to verify it. And then also, at first, you were using where the person attended secondary school, junior high school, but because of the free SHS, all those, so we need to look at how robust the mean testing system is. And with the Ghana card, I think we can do that. Verifying income. If we can work with the government to assess other database, we don't, because of the common identifier, we're not able to, at first, we're not able to have direct with the tax system. Now we have the common identifier. So if the policymakers, the government, the parliament, and other stakeholders will help us so that we can do the API with other database that can help us to verify income, and by so doing, we should be able to solve the data issue and then have a robust means testing instrument to look at proper funding for education, and for that matter, Student Loan Trust Fund.
So I'll move to the VC here. I'll come to this table, please. Prof.
Thank you very much. My name is Lydia Aziato, University of Health and Allied Sciences. So I would first thank the consultants and the Academy for this opportunity. I want to wear different caps. The first cap is my role as a Vice Chancellor. So the funding, I was asking myself, is this the funding as in just teaching? But for those of us who are in specialized universities, the higher cost is rather the skills training of the students. So the skills lab, the field cost, where our preceptors are also demanding some remuneration, the vehicles that take the student to the field, the maintenance thereof, the insurance thereof. The university as an identity. So you can't have a university and you don't belong to any of the associations, VCG, and other international organizations. And these are charged in dollars. If you don't belong, you restrict the opportunity for your members to apply for funding. Apart from that, is also some particular insurance that some funding authorities you are supposed to have as a university. And these are also very, very expensive. Infrastructure, I don't want to go there. Some of us, we need to pay for the GTEC accreditation and also professional accreditation. And that one is even more expensive than the GTEC one. I look at it and say that we don't have financial clearance since last year, nothing. And some of the staff have died, some have gone on retirement. So we have a few also on IGF salary. I look at it and I say, okay, some of the universities are veterans, some of us are young. And our student numbers are lower, so our IGF pockets is lower. It's more complex, so I'm glad the students are here. The funding is not just your school fees, so a lot go into having that university standing there, identified as a university. When you talk about your library, the access to some library resources, $10,000 plus, where is the money going to come from? And so if the government is giving emoluments, yes, it's good, but it's not enough. It is not enough. So I had our Get Fund administrator giving us all the ideas as to how to increase funding. But I just want to say that for the students, know that the school fees is not enough. But it is sad to say that some of your colleagues are not paying the money. The parents will give you the money and you don't use it to pay the fees. But I rest my case there. I know my brother is here. He may want to add something to it. Thank you.
You're from Vice Chancellor to Vice Chancellor. Who am I? Please go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Kwame Nakwansa Eidu. I am Vice Chancellor Unimark. I call my university the latest kid on the block. But also the immediate past chairman of Vice Chancellors Ghana. But also as someone with the, should I say, enviable or an enviable record of being perhaps the first Vice Chancellor who had 2 demonstrations within the first 3 years of his term of office, all solely on the basis of payment of school fees. And then as someone who sits on virtually all the boards and committees at GTEC, if I want to talk, I can talk forever. There are too many things that I see. But we have talked about equity and we have talked about sustainability. I think those are very important for us as people who are interested in higher education and also the funding. And the government, my sister here has enumerated the number of things that universities have to do with money. And so I won't even go there. But what I want to say is this. As Professor Aiste said, we must understand the cost of university education. That cost cannot be borne by one group alone. The government cannot bear that cost alone. We must understand that if we are interested in sustainability, it must be shared cost. And increasingly, the conversation, I think,
must be towards the beneficiaries of university education paying more towards that. I say that because especially when I hear the students speak, I feel a certain sense of entitlement. In mentioning what I've done and where I've been, I didn't say I need to say that I spent almost all my academic career in Australia. I did my PhD there, went through to professorship before I came. I've been in Ghana only 5 years. So I know the Australian system inside out. All my children have gone through university there, so I know the system inside out. There is a sense of entitlement that we, especially the students, bring to this conversation, and that bothers me a little bit. It's actually something that cuts across many sectors in the country. We need to understand government cannot do everything. And I dare say that university education is actually a privilege. It is a privilege. Up to secondary SHS, fine. University education, you are improving yourself, for yourself and for the nation, agreed. So there must be some kind of government interest in that and government investment in that. But to a large extent as well, the individual benefits from it. And the individual must understand that we must make significant efforts in contributing to that education. That's all I want to say for now.
I'm going to come here and allow you to join the conversation, and after that, I'm coming to your table, okay? Hello. Ms. Ba, bring me the mic. So we'll start with the consultant, and then we'll get the panelists involved, and then we'll go back. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can respond to some of the specific comments
here. I think all the points that have been raised are well noted, and they are very legitimate points that can be incorporated in what we are doing currently to improve the background paper that will ensure that there's an enhanced funding system for the entire country. With regards to the point made by the GET Fund administrator, he mentioned the issue of the challenges you have with regards to scholarships, as I have mentioned in the paper. But the focus is not on what GET Fund provides. The scholarship scheme that is discussed in the paper is holistic. For instance, GET Fund provides scholarships. The universities also have their own scholarship schemes. And then we have the scholarship secretariat as well. And so the idea of attempting to request that there should be an improved system that would allow for every student to benefit is not just targeted at GET Fund. And so it is for us to make the recommendations in such a way that the refinement would affect the entire system as it relates to scholarships across all the schools, in fact, all the public universities, including the scholarship secretariat. There was a point about, I think Mr. Sarkodie, mentioned the issue of the loan repayment issues and attempted to explain the challenges that you have. Of course, I don't know the extent to which means testing has been adopted, but there's this issue about a graduate finishing school just 1 or 2 years within his completion, maybe after national service. Then you start receiving calls from the student loan trust asking you to pay your student loan, even though that person is not employed. I think these are deficiencies that must be revisited. And I believe that the loan repayment issues, that the default rate that we have, most of it is likely to be coming from students that have graduated over the last 5 years and are unemployed. And yet the student loan trust expect them to do what they can to pay their loans. I don't know where they're going to get that money from. And so these are genuine issues that is of concern to the financing system in Ghana. And of course, it is natural for us to debate over it and deepen the discussion as to the way forward. Again, the approach at the student loan trust, I don't know whether you take into consideration the future earnings of graduates that you extend these loans to. So that if I am given a loan, I'm expecting that, okay, if I start working, then the repayment system will kick in. Unfortunately, I don't know how effective or efficient that system is. So I would probably want to take some of the ideas from the floor, and then we'll see how best we can incorporate most of them into the paper to enrich the discussion. I think the point made about Madam Professor and the former Vice Chair of the Vice Chancellors are well noted, and we'll do our best to incorporate it into our discussion going forward.
Thank you very much. Let me begin my contribution by respectfully disagreeing with the former VC Ghana's proposition that the students should pay more and that university education is a privilege. In our context, our constitution itself requires that the government and the state take adequate steps to make university accessible and, if possible, even free. The understanding that we know is that education is an investment, including higher education. It is an investment that comes and has social capital, has returns. And so countries that have developed will see the evidence of, would have the evidence of people with higher education, a lot of their students, a lot of their people having higher education. There is also a lot of empirical evidence that clearly suggests that higher gross enrollment ratio, higher participation at the university level or tertiary education level have significant impact on gross domestic product of a country. So it is in our interest not to make tertiary education a privilege, but rather make it accessible for everybody. And that's the context within which I said I want to respectfully disagree with Prof.
Fine. So explain to us how it gets paid for.
Yes, so I mean, it's even in the family. Somebody who is coming from a very low income background is able to get tertiary education, is able to get good employment, and then not only contributing to society, but also becoming an opportunity to leapfrog probably the poverty incidents in their family. So they get this.
We agree with you.
Yes.
It's an investment, there are returns, but the issue is how is it to be paid for? How do we finance it so that the equity and sustainability issues?
Yes, I think that's a discussion, but I only wanted to make a point. Yes. On that side, and of course, as a society, the benefit to us is very huge. We have a lot of young people out there creating problems. That's why we are building a lot of walls in our houses, because people have no less opportunity to participate in that. Yeah. So the more we get our young people into tertiary education, the better for the country. In fact, some of them even get exported to other countries and then give us foreign direct investment. But the important thing is that we keep on opening the participation. And I want to agree with Professor Aziato, the Vice Chancellor for University of Allied and Social Science, in respect of the different universities that we have. Some of them are new, they have very limited capacity. So the issue about IGF contribution and innovative fundraising from the universities has to be looked at case by case, because obviously some of the universities have larger capacity to generate funds. We had an interaction with some of the universities. They've gone into commercial activity. They are doing fine yogurt and producing eggs and other commercial activities that generate resource for us. So yes, the state will have to look at the capacities of the universities, so the funding sources are addressed in respect of the capacities of the universities to generate resources. The student loan person talked about the means testing, and I'm sure that what you are referring to is a proxy means testing, where you are asking information base from the participant and then use that as a proxy. And the information is their demographic background, and use it as a proxy. So as we speak now, there are proxy means testing approach being used in Ghana, like the LEAP program, you know, where we are able to give some funding to some homes. But we don't have the data for means testing itself, and that's the challenge that we have. The student loan, as you indicated, is giving about 2,000, 3,000. Actually, we are deceiving ourselves in portraying that we are helping the students, because 2,000, 3,000, in actual fact, what per year, what is the student going to do with that? And as he indicated, the issue is not about the payment. In fact, the student loans have improved. They have done presentation before the committee, and they have indicated how they have improved in their repayment processes, and that students are really repaying. The issue is the monies made available. So this year, about 50 million Ghana cedi or so, and you ask yourself, how much can 50 million Ghana cedi do to the student loan in terms of providing opportunity of funding for the students? So that's actually a big problem that we have to look at. And again, it has to do with the revenue. See, everything we are talking about is a government revenue and how much it can allocate. So that's why this whole conversation has to be looked at from the capacity of the government to give more resources. And also, as a country, I think it's important for us to begin to look at the skill set that the country needs. So everybody gets up and decide which university, which program they are going to do. We do not have any data as to the skill set, that how many engineers do we need, how many technologists do we need, how many mathematicians do we need. We don't have that. So everybody is doing other courses, and that also imposes fiscal strain on the country. But if we are able to determine, like in other countries, so for the UK, for example, they realized that they needed more math teachers, they needed more science teachers, so they decided that if you want to go into teaching mathematics and science, we are going to offer you £20,000 to go into it. So that's a skills gap that the country is looking for to plug. And I think that as we have this conversation on higher education funding, we need to be able to discuss around the skills gap that the higher institutions, higher educations want to fill. And I'm sure governments and the other resources that we are looking for can be directed towards plugging this skill gap. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You will win. This is the politician talking. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I think we've made a salient point on the various funding means to help facilitate education. But one thing, I'll touch on the student loan trust fund. You made a figure of, the immediate speaker said an amount of 50 million Ghana cedis was directed to student loan trust fund. Actually, the amount directed to them, 50 million, only 25 million was sent to their quarters. In a way, you could clearly see that we are not really prepared for what we seek to do. Because now, you see, we are making a mention of 3,000 Ghana cedis designated to students that apply student loan trust fund. Meanwhile, the amount of monies which are being sent to the student loan trust fund is very low. So in a way, we are deceiving our own selves. You see, we want to cater for a certain need, yet the resources to cater for that need is limited. Then how then do we cater for that large numbers? A student whose school fees is around 4,500 applies for student loan trust fund, and the amount the student loan trust fund could give is 3,000. So how then does the student then caters for the remaining 1,500 Ghana cedis? So we still come back to GETFund. Though we are not saying GETFund, it's just that body that just releases money. But moving forward, in catering for some of these issues, enlarging that particular thing, as we are looking at other external sources, we still should look at uncapping GETFund. Regardless of how hard the systems have been in this particular country, our statutory funds should not be touched. So regardless of how hard the country has become, our statutory fund should never be touched with. If you don't touch with it, you'll be able to do a lot of things. Past, when we had GETFund funding UDS, were having GETFund funding Kumasi Polytechnic, now Kumasi Technical University, when GETFund was not capped. Still, even those times, the system was still hard. But if you are serious indeed as a country who really think about the future of the young ones, then there are certain funds that need not to be touched. If you are touching funds regarding energy and other stuff, fine. But in my city as the National Union of Ghana Student President, I feel any serious country should not touch their education statutory funds, especially which has to do with GETFund. If we touch it, then the main issues in our home, we've not dealt with it, yet we are going out to seek funds to come and address some of the issues in the house. So if you're able to deal with the actual issues in the house, then we can look outside to look at how we can get other funds to cater for the things. The system will continuously be hard. If you go for the external funds to still cater for stuff, still the system is hard, and it won't be able to solve anything. So if you're able to solve, we're able to uncap GETFund, trust you me, we'll be able to do a lot of things. Now, GETFund projects in various senior high schools is a thing of the past. We don't do it again. Why? Because GETFund is not having that resources to do it. And it's worrying. I know as our administrator, he sits back and he weeps. But you see, because of sometimes political things, you won't be able to make certain things clear.
We'll invite you to talk about
Yes, so with the student loan transfer, I feel private institutions we should be able to sit down and draw a plan for private institutions. They are not catered for. They're all Ghanaian students in our country, and I feel they should be catered in the student loan transfer and GETFund plan. And if that happens, I feel it's going to go a long way. Now, with the innovativeness of tertiary institutions, the honorable from the industry was talking about how universities could collaborate. I was having a discussion with the principals, Ghana, of various 46 colleges of education. And when you get to their various campuses, we acknowledge these teacher trainees as tertiary institutions. Yet, when you go and you find the kind of places these students are sleeping, comparing that to the university, it's very disheartening. And they are claiming they want various organizations to partner with them and build hostels and all that. And I sit back and I wonder why this is not happening. Is it that they are not approaching the industry players? Is it that there are restrictions of not them doing the needed things to move on?
We'll have another round.
All these things are critical things that needs to be looked at.
Please give the microphone to him. I cannot resist telling you a story. I went to Helsinki, Finland. In the middle of the city, there is a huge building. When I asked, it was owned by the National Union of Finnish Students, okay? They used their monies, they bought the properties, now they rent them as office blocks. So I think that when we are talking about financing, that is where the issue about who is Father Christmas and not, there are some critical things the state should do. Nobody is stopping students from also thinking how, the same way that Nat invested his money into hostels and things, students can do the same. So no, it's just an invitation to think outside the box, that it cannot just be the usual suspects. Students can also partner with industry to do some of these things. Mr. Sari.
I have no evidence that the quality of tertiary education is on the decline, but the evidence is that we are not meeting our gross tertiary enrollment targets. At the end of the medium term 2021, we were just around 20, against a target of 25. The ultimate is to get to 40% by 2030. As we speak, we are still not at the 2021 target. And looking at the data from GTech, if we don't undertake aggressive reforms in repositioning interventions meant to support needy students to access tertiary education, we will not be able to meet this target. Because the reason why we are not here is that it's not because more and more students are not passing WASSCE. That's not what the data from WAEC suggests. About 170K should have gone to university per their results last year. But we are seeing about 160K moving to tertiary or tertiary institutions. You understand? It means that there are significant financial barriers. And so if we don't reposition interventions aimed at providing support to needy but qualified students to access tertiary education, it will be difficult for us to assess. And I also don't have any evidence that any tertiary institution is full, for which reason someone will be denied admission. Because a lot of our institutions have become innovative enough and are expanding access through non-brick and mortar approaches, i.e. virtual schooling. So we must reposition the interventions that seek to support poor students to access. And that's why I'm saying that, number one, our student loan scheme must be made responsive. It must meet students at the point that they need the money, not at the end of the semester when some of them have dropped out. And secondly, our scholarship system must be totally reset. There's a scholarship secretariat, it must be scrapped. I have said it that what we need is a scholarships authority. It shouldn't be under the office of the president. We must have a scholarships authority. That is a composite body managing all scholarships, GMPC scholarships, all this plethora of all these protons must come under one umbrella, under proper legislation. The scholarship secretary hasn't got even an LI. You understand? And so the whole idea ab initio wasn't to give scholarship BR, it's just to give small merit-based ones, and the rest are all political aspects. Let's have a proper scholarships authority to manage all the scholarships and collapse all the small statutory scholarships in institutions that are not managed transparently and are not responding to their needs. Third, municipal support. I've seen many universities in Africa do well, get some level of support from the municipalities that they are located in. The University of Ghana is located in the most affluent, if not the second most affluent municipality. I don't know the connection between UG and then Iowa West Wugon, where I live. But the point I want to make is that on this university's board, you will see one or two people representing local government, like University of Pretoria. You will see one or two local government reps on their board, on their governing council. We call them governing council here. We must find a way of increasing the participation, if not facilitating the participation, if there's none, so that such municipalities can see a reason to support the universities. Because after all, if you go to such municipalities, they have single delegates and under 20 number of public schools. They are not putting any money behind in basic education. So, but the university serves a useful purpose to those municipalities. And these are rich municipalities, I must admit. So we can look into it. Finally, let me quickly add that I disagree with, yes, I don't know your name, but I respectfully disagree with you that tertiary education is business. No, it's not business. You see, we can't be having a discussion around commodifying tertiary education just because it is expensive to run. No. Even in Western Europe, that conversation hasn't happened. Europeans are making tertiary education free. European countries are making tertiary education free. They are advanced countries. And then we, lower middle income countries, are having a discussion around commodifying tertiary education. No, it remains an obligation of the state. We know government alone cannot do it. And government alone has never done it since the era of cost sharing. But the reality is that it is government responsibility. Immediately we discuss commodification, this is what will happen. Government says that at the secondary level, there are a lot of financial barriers to access. Reason why a policy called Free Senior School was introduced. Fantastic. Immediately the policy was introduced, we saw indeed a removal of significant financial barriers, leading to about 30% increase in enrollment. We've seen transition from basic to secondary improve from 66% in 2016 to 81% in 2022. No one should tell you that obviously there were significant cost barriers, because we haven't seen any change in the BEC trends. It's always a stagnant. So why are we assuming that immediately that poor person completes secondary school, their parents suddenly have money, and that they can participate in a commodified tertiary education? No. We will not reach 40% GTE by 2030 if we have that discussion. And so please, every other funding initiative is complementary, but the onus rests with government and us, citizenry. Pay our taxes, let's ensure that government invests sufficiently in tertiary education. Whatever comes from IGF is a plus, because if we concentrate overly on IGF, we have a situation where more and more percentage of students will be given the high in demand programs and made fee paying because they need to raise funds. What happens? I have many students I'm supporting who were given pharmacy at University of Ghana fee paying, and I'm quietly swallowing that bitter pill because they couldn't have gone to school. But the reality is that it's injustice to those students because they are orphans. So we shouldn't put too much pressure on the universities to dwell too much on the IGF factor, because sometimes it can be, discriminatory against poor students. Government's responsibility in funding basic education cannot be checked, and it is non-negotiable. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we are talking about a public good, right? I was actually worried when I heard the Association of Ghana Industries, because the finance minister said something like that last year. So I wondered who had exchanged views about weaning of public universities. The issue is that we do have public universities. We want them to remain public. And we want also the private universities, the students as Ghanaians, to be able to benefit. How do we do that? Madam.
So, very quickly, I think we look at the bottom, and actually my institution looks at the bottom third. I mean, we tend to, who are the poor and all that. But sometimes we also have to look at the top 10%. Why are they getting it for free? Okay? And I am taking care of 2 students in private universities. They couldn't, the competition was too great, so they couldn't come here. They couldn't even buy their registration things, so they couldn't come to a public university. So they are in a private university. I was just sitting here calculating how much it cost, because when I was going into it, I didn't have much knowledge about the full cost. It is 600 cedis a month for transportation alone. And then for the fees, it's 6,200 per semester. So that's 12,400. And let's say the number of months they go to school is 10 months out of 12. So that will be 6,000 plus like 18,400. That is for 1 year, for one student doing business. Okay. So, I'm thinking, if I knew this, maybe I would have just paid for one student and say, wait, and then next year I'll help you. But they are both in private schools now. So I think it's very important that we look at the top 10% or the top 15% and say that as your contribution to the growth of the university, what can you pay? And that can only be done if the universities come to an agreement with government. Because from where I sit, I know that the universities are not free to do a lot of things because they may go into excesses. So the government is the regulator. But it is important that we have this conversation. If the 10% can pay and that can be used to support the bottom third, why not? In addition to what government is doing. As I indicated earlier, I was saying that, as for the remuneration, today is not the time. Public universities will remain public universities, and, the government will continue to pay the remuneration of lecturers and non-lecturers. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll come to this table, but I think somebody made a point to remember that even in the richer countries, they are making higher education progressively free. It is paid for at some level. This is what we should be looking at. who is paying, how are they paying, and how do we access the system so that those commitments that we have made, we also meet them, the 40%. You know, we haven't talked about taxation, you know, broad taxation, because in many systems, we think that somehow it's free. It's not free. Somebody is paying. How do we ensure that everybody is paying so that more people can get quality? We are also talking about quality, including where you sleep. Okay? Yes, please.
Thank you. Permit me to...
Please reintroduce yourself.
Senor Akoli, Finance Officer, University of Education, Winneba. Permit me to clarify some few issues about data. The Ghana Tertiary Education Commission has the data when it comes to cost of training a student. In fact, they had it as far back as when they were NCTE. So we have the data on cost. And let me just share a few with you. For teaching cost alone, for the social sciences, it's 13,501 cedis, 8 pesos. Medicine, 36,168 cedis, 88 pesos. And when you come to the total, this is just teaching, and I don't want to bore you because we have all of them. When it comes to the total cost to train one student for a year using the GTEC norms, GTEC has commissioned practitioners and academics in the field, and they'll be able to compute the cost of training one student in each of the disciplines for a year. And Madam, permit me to go through the total cost. For science, applied arts, technology, and health science, undergraduate, 54,471 cedis and 4 pesos. Postgraduate, 81,706 cedis and 55 pesos.
Sir,
per annum.
I'm going to beg you. I think your 54,000 shocked us compared to the 3,000. So
yes.
Our consultant has to catch a flight back.
Okay.
And what I would like is that you actually share those figures with
I
us
will.
so that it will be incorporated.
I will.
But I'm glad that you have raised it.
I just want to say that
we
there
were not
is
sure. You've told
GTEC
us.
has the cost of training per
The
student.
problem was that he went to GTEC and he couldn't get the copy
All
of the
right.
report.
So we'll support the consultant in many other fields, including data on the GOG's funding, because the data even on the Ministry of Education database, according to the program-based budget of the government of Ghana, has it that the highest percentage between, I'm having data from 2016 to 2023, the highest GOG funding for higher education between that period was 60%. And I'm quoting from Government of Ghana program-based budget per Ministry of Education. Again, I'll share that data with the consultants in order not to prolong the discussion.
Yes.
Not, yeah, yes. Yes, we have the data for expenditure as well.
So Dr. Ayam will...
And it's nowhere near 86%.
66.
No, it gave 86 if you add a GET fund. So we acknowledge the difficulty in getting data. But I think we in the public universities and the public tertiary institution must come to support this very important research work. And I commend him for getting this.
So he will contact you so that we can iron out. But this highlights the need for accessible data. You know? Yes.
Yes.
So Dr. Ayam, please, as you go out, please take his contact and let's make sure that because we want to produce a credible document.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So in conclusion, I want to say that I appreciate the comment by the Deputy Chair of the Education Committee of Parliament that we are deceiving ourselves by giving student loan of 2,000 and 3,000. But in the same way, we are deceiving ourselves by charging school fees of between 1,400 and 2,000 cedis a year per student.
This is the Director of Finance talking.
So I think it's a whole thing that we need to look at, because currently, if you look at the funding requirement of the universities, no, tertiary institutions, we are only having 32% of that. And obviously, we cannot say that it's not having effect on quality. If you're in the system, you know it's having effect on quality. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please, we are distributing evaluation forms. Please make sure that you fill them and drop them as you leave. You don't put your name on it, but it allows us to evaluate what we have done. Madam, very quickly, because so many people have signaled that they need to leave. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Mine has to do with a comment made by the Honorable Deputy Chair of Education. Yes, he made a comment that concerning IGF, it's like a closed book. And so that closed book made me to understand that maybe there is no transparency in we disclosing the IGF that we make in the various universities. And I want to respectfully say that that is not the case, because each month we have to report to Ministry of Finance, we report to GTEC. And if you come to the university campuses, you realize that we have used IGF to support a number of infrastructure projects, having to even complete some Get Fund projects that were stalled. And the Vice Chancellor for you has also mentioned that they are using IGF to even pay for compensation. So it looks as if there is a public perception that we are not disclosing the IGFs that we make, but really we are doing that. And I would like the Honorable Minister to maybe tour the university campuses to find it for himself what IGF have been used to do to improve access, equity, and all the things that we want to do as a university. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I cannot resist not giving the mic to the Ghana NUCS president.
Thank you very much. My name is Shadrach, representing the Ghana National Union of Technical Students.
Technical students.
Yes, so coming from...
Your position has not been challenged.
Yes. So coming from the technical background, I would want to touch on the cost of TVET education in Ghana. I think the consultant mentioned issue of access. I believe that when you go to our various institutions and you look at the school fees, you see that TVET programs are one of the highest paying fees in our institutions, and that restricts access to those programs. And so as we are deliberating on ways to finance higher education in Ghana, I want to propose that we prioritize TVET and look at ways of reducing the cost of TVET education in Ghana so that many Ghanaians can have access to TVET. Secondly, I want to agree with Mr. Kofi Asare when he mentioned that our scholarship system should target SHS leavers who are yet to enter the higher institutions. Because if we want to wait for the people or the student to get into the higher institution before we sponsor them, the whole happened to students who are unable to even buy application or admission to the universities. And so we should look at those students, because I have met a student who completed a technical institute. The guy is very innovative. I met him at a tech expo where he was exhibiting some of his projects.
Please,
and when
our consultant has to go to the airport. We got your point. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
I'm going to ask Professor Clifford Tego, the chair of the steering committee, to give his closing remarks. But I want to thank all of you. Obviously, we could have stayed here till 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock. It's been a stimulating discussion. We haven't finished at all, but thank you very much.
I think she's already given the remarks on my behalf. But I think we all agree that this is a very crucial subject matter for this country. If we are to make any proper headway in the direction of training people at the highest level for development of this nation, funding will always be a very key issue. It's all been very complicated or complex matter, but I think we've got fantastic ideas from everybody here. I cannot summarize the entire thing. That would take another 2 or 3 hours. But some of the key things, like the issue of efficiency, I think we glossed over it. I will give an example. In Taiwan, Taiwan has allocates 23% of its GDP to, 23% of the budget, national budget, to education. That's equivalent to 5% of GDP. If, Dr. Yam, your figures, you said we gave what, 7.8% of overall of GDP and 26% of the budget to education. But they don't have problems. I know their base is big, but the percentages they are using are smaller. We are using bigger percentage, and yet we seem to have not to have enough. Of course, we need to generate more funds, and maybe the figures will go up. But the issue of efficiency is important. One other issue I want to raise for your consideration is that, look, we're in a system where the politics play very highly. Government funding is dwindling, and yet we go on setting up more institutions. In fact, what is really maybe more annoying is, I'll give the example here. I used to be chairman of the National Council for Tertiary Education. And the ministry received a lot of applications from people who have set up private institutions, and they think they can't run them anymore. They want to pass them on to government. We advised against it. But as soon as I left, they absorbed all those institutions. So suddenly, they had to find money to give to them. Where are they going to take the money from? From the existing institutions. So please, as we advise, we're going to look at this thing. It's not just the issue of the funding as a specific thing, because funding permeates all aspects of the institutions. And so there's a need to touch on other aspects as you go along with your final paper. The model of institutions that we have also in the tertiary sector, almost every institution is a what? It's a residential institution, right? So we need to look at the difference between the actual academic thing and the other things. Recently, KNUST did something about solar, and so to help augment the power system they have. But the bottom line came to how much they were spending on electricity alone. So if we continue to have these big residential campuses, we must think about how to maintain those campuses and so on. The last point, Madam, so you don't drive me out of here. I think Professor Troy Suman has to be introduced more fully. I heard Methodist University. No, but okay. He was Chief Director of Ministry of Education before, and also the chairman of West African Examinations Council, right? So he's the one who pushes all the students onto us that we cannot handle. Are you going to go down? No, you can't. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much. I hope you've all filled your evaluation forms. Please pick your lunch as you leave, and then see the gentleman near the door to sort you out for our very modest transport allowance. But thank you so very much for joining us. We hope to see you here another time. Thank you so much. You are welcome. You can. Thank you. Yes. So we'll talk.
Okay.
Thank you.
Transport allowance. I've made some suggestions.
Okay.
In terms of autonomy, efficiency,
Sure.
and all
No
that.
transport allowance. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm it, yes, yeah. Now, 3,000, 2,000, 3,000, yeah, then. There be an oh, yeah, don't remember. And then, you're free banks, because the banks should be financing you for this 2,000, 3,000. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, baby. Why? I'll send it to you. Please give this to me.